starts a live stream,
Darling,
stands
I'm
up.
recording. The podcast will ring you afterwards, all right?
Quite literally live on the live stream. Hello, everyone.
Darling.
Great to have your company here on the live stream recording of Lakeside Drive's F1 pre-drinks podcast. My name is James. Tommy T is the other technically capable person, and the wandering campy is, well, let's have a look. Where is he? He's on the bottom of your screen. With a new camera, he looks very far away. If I look at the YouTube picture myself, what is that blue thing, Campy, on top of your wardrobe to your left?
Oh, can you see that?
Yep.
That's my roller. That's my roller.
Well done on stretching and rolling.
I'm going to move this way so you can't see it.
What?
'Cause that's the junk thing above my cupboard up there. So
Well, you just moving without moving the camera that's not how that works. Anyway, chat, great to have your company. Look, if you're joining us, this is the live stream recording of what will be the audio podcast. So if you're looking for shiny, brilliant, delicious audio, this potentially isn't the place to be. You can find our audio podcast. If you're listening to this after the live stream, I will add a comment to the link below, but generally it takes a half an hour or so after we finish here to upload it. All right, boys. Well, should we get into our Brazilian pre-drinks / sprint race qualifying something
race.
review? Oh, that sounds good to me.
let's do it.
Are you ready, Campy? Have you moved the camera yet?
Oh, can you see my roller still or what?
I don't think anyone
No, I
cares,
can't.
mate.
There you go.
No one does care. But,
It's
you know.
gone forever, which is not a bad thing. All right, here we go. It's sprint race qualifying time, and Lewis Hamilton goes from 20th to 5th in the sprint race qualifying. Sky F1's post-race stage is overwhelmed by lots of shouting and happy birthday singing, and Daniel Ricciardo didn't have a great start, did he? G'day there, my name is James Baldwin, and welcome to Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, we are pre-drinking ahead of the Brazilian Grand Prix. And I'm joined, as always, by my friends and yours. It's Tommy T. G'day, mate.
G'day, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. And someone who was unusually found out to have a foam roller in his house. It's Campy.
Yes.
G'day, mate.
Gentlemen, how are you?
It's very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Feeling limber,
Am I what?
supple and loose?
Yeah,
from
limber and
rolling
loose,
before?
ready. Are you
Yeah,
ready?
it doesn't sit there
Free
like
roll
an
before the
ornament.
podcast.
Jeez, lad.
Doesn't sit there like an ornament. Begins. Campy's saying begins. If you'd like to volunteer to put together a book of Campy's sayings for the end of the year, we might even
please.
publish a Lakeside Drive book for 2022 of Campy's ridiculousness. Would be bestseller probably.
Don't poke the bear this morning, boys. I'm a bit grumpy. I've haven't slept yet. I watched 3 games of rugby last night, and 2 of the results didn't go my way. And then to watch a sprint race at 7 in the morning, I was like, "Geez, F1, get your shit together." What an absolute nightmare of a concept these weekends are. So I've made up my mind on these alternative weekends. They are absolutely rubbish. Get rid of them.
Can we?
Straight in.
Tommy T, let's ask you first. Are you a breakfast and Formula One kind of guy? Are you happy to do both, or would you prefer it to be in the evening and having dinner in Formula One?
Oh, I don't mind breakfast and Formula One. I think the problem is on Mondays I just start work early, so I can't capitalise on it fully. I think if I was anyone else with a 9 to 5, best way to go.
Yeah,
Big
very
fan.
good. Okay, Campy, what about you? Are you a breakfast or a dinner, or even lunch, I suppose? What kind of food would you be having with Formula One, ideally?
A couple of croissants or something.
Croissants.
Yeah,
Hates on the
that'd be
French, comes out and says, bam, this is the breakfast that I want.
This is about the only thing the French have done all right. So,
Oh, it's starting off
You're a
well.
classic.
Look, this weekend though is no good for Monday morning race watching. 4 o'clock in the east. It's even worse time in the west. I did say last weekend that at least the eastern suburbs of the Australian countryside had a better time watching a 6 a.m. race. It's no good. I don't understand why we've decided to go from Mexico to Brazil and back further again. But it is what it is. We obviously love the sport too much. Look, am I going to be watching it live? Probably not. I'll be watching it at probably 6:30 ahead of work, like probably the rest of the country. But hey, look, massive shout out to you if you are watching this YouTube live stream. Thank you to all 607 of you who have subscribed so far to the channel. Really appreciate it. We're loving doing this, of course. And here's a question for you. Who would you like us to interview? If we can interview anyone, except for obviously Daniel Ricciardo, it's probably a little bit hard to do over the Christmas break. But if you want us to interview anyone, who would it be? Let us know in the comments or send through, I don't know, an email to hello@lakesidedrive.com.au. We will probably get back to you. But be interesting to see who we would like to talk to. Let's start with a little bit of news, shall we, ahead of talking about practice, which I didn't watch. There's an Alfa Romeo dealership in China that has put up big posters along their windows advertising Guan Yu Zhou as the first Chinese F1 driver. Is this the worst kept F1 secret since George Russell going to Mercedes? Tommy T, do you think this is just a bit of a laugh, or do you think this is just legit and gone too early?
I think this would be like if Campy bought out a Ford dealership in Dramana. He'd just start saying Daniel Ricciardo was the driver for Ford. You've just got some gung-ho guy who's gone, you know what, I'm just going to go early and be right. He's just jumped the gun.
Bit of guerrilla marketing right there.
Exactly. I don't think this is any confirmation. I do think it will happen, but I don't think we can go off this lunatic who's just done what he wants with his own dealership.
It did make me laugh though that was it, and it was but of course Campy, and I don't even know if you know the existence of Reddit, but Reddit found it, and it's gone through Twitter and Instagram and everything else like wildfire. What do you think about that? Do you think this is a done deal and we're just waiting for an announcement?
Yeah, I think it's a real shame for our sport. I think it's probably a done deal, and $35 million, I mean, or whatever he's bringing to the sport. Money walks, bullshit talks. So it's a real shame. It's a bit of a spot. It's a bad look for our sport. I mean, what's that guy done this year? He's had one good race in Baku. Other than that, he's been absolutely rubbish in comparison to our boy. What's his name? Oscar Piastri. So sorry.
You are very tired, aren't you,
Yeah,
mate?
I'm having a
well.
day. No, he's done absolutely nothing this year. Oscar's had a stellar year, and the other guys, our poor chair as well, who's had has had a ripper year. So,
Jr.
yeah, so look, it's a bit of a shame for us fans of the sport to see another paid driver get in, because we just don't need them really. If you get into F1 to get some paid drivers, then what's the point in even getting into F1? It's you're not going to get a return on your investment. And anyway, good for China. They've just declared that, you know, their extension for the contract for the race has been to 2025 too. So spewing, we have to put up with 4 years of a Chinese Grand Prix, which is possibly the worst track in the world. Just produces the worst races ever. So look,
See off, mate. Go for it.
Mate,
Let me salvage this conversation slightly
sorry.
into a more positive sense, Campy.
All I say on F1 is I get in there and we got equality and all this idealistic stuff come in. Then we go to do business with a place like China. I mean, give me a fucking break. Seriously.
Market.
There it is.
It is absolutely ridiculous, and the hypocrisy at the top levels. Jim, when you go over there and meet your crew, I hope you meet a few from F1 and you give them a bit of my opinion. That'd be great. Thanks. Cheers.
Yes, no, thank you. I'd like a job. What I would do in a positive sense, talking about the Formula 2 series, is that our boy, Callan Williams, who's from Perth, has been confirmed to do some testing in Trident's Formula 2 car ahead of next year. Of course, he will be wanting to have a good crack at getting an F2 seat for next year, of course. So will Jack Doohan. What's he doing? Very well, honestly. It's good news for F2. Hopefully to see both Callan and to see Jack into F2 if Oscar departs. But what does that mean for the longer term? I hear you say, well, it then means that 2023 presents potentially 3 Australian junior drivers with enough super license points to jump into Formula 1. Could it be that at some point between 23 to maybe 25, 26, that we have 4 Australian drivers on the grid? Probably not.
Oh,
But I'm
No,
just going to
not
say
gonna
it would be very, very good a lot. And then suddenly everybody like, oh, bloody Australian bias. We're sick of Australians talking
they're
about
everywhere.
Australian drivers. It would just happen very quickly. I didn't watch practice at all. Was there even practice this weekend? Tommy T, did you watch
Doesn't
practice?
exist. Nah, didn't
No.
happen.
Campy, did you watch practice?
I
No.
did, yep.
Oh, okay.
I
Go.
did.
Was there anything exciting that happened in practice?
McLaren were rubbish on Friday. They were somewhat rubbish in qualifying too.
So
But,
rubbish.
Stop.
they seemed to pull it out. Couple of spins, nothing major. We were sort of expecting rain. I mean, it was pretty overcast on Friday. I didn't see last night the free practice session 2, although I think Alonso topped the time sheets, but they were running all 112s and 113s, which is sort of, 5 seconds off the pace. So it's a nothing session. Yeah, look, nothing much to report really.
Well, let's talk
Other
about
than the DRS issue that we had with Lewis Hamilton.
that's qualifying. Let's talk about qualifying ahead
Was
of
it qualifying
the
or
sprint
was it-
race. No,
what
yeah,
was it called?
sprint. Damn, the Speed King Award time is what it was.
Bloody hell.
Let's talk about that before we talk about the sprint qualifying race session. Look, Lewis was mega. It has to be said.
Oh.
New power unit. Bits, at least 5-place grid penalty for him. He had to take it here. Tommy T, didn't he, before
Yep.
we get into the rest of the season, especially with tracks like Qatar and Jeddah, which we just don't know what Formula One cars are going to be like around there. Jeddah is supposed to be the fastest Formula One circuit, which is a stat which would be good if the track existed yet, which it still doesn't.
Where are they pulling that from?
Something to do with simulation.
My
but-
backyard's the fastest track, but no one will know.
True story.
Claimed it. There you go.
But anyway, so we obviously know that Mercedes rather need that power advantage. Campy, some interesting comments from Christian Horner over the qualifying period, or just after qualifying. He said that the power unit life of a Honda loses about 1/10 of a second from brand new to dead in the water. And the Mercedes power unit, he didn't give anything away, but it seems to be a lot greater than that. Does that surprise you at all in terms of how we're looking at things? Or have Honda just made such leaps and bounds in the last couple of years that Mercedes now, of course, with the budget regulations for this year, are just really suffering from these reliability issues in comparison?
Look, I think there's probably a bit of truth to 1/10 from the start to the end of the engine life. That's crap. Like, they're going to drop off more than that. That is normal. I think that's a bit of a PR spin by Christian Horner there. What I think there's probably a bit of truth in the sense that the drop off is worse in the Mercedes than what it is in the Honda, and we've probably seen that throughout the year. But yeah, I mean, it depends. What we're getting, I think it's about five full race weekends under race and a full race per engine unit. So look, 1/10. No, that's just utter bollocks. They've lost 1/10 in a controlled environment when they're testing the engines on dynos and reproducing lap by lap what the engines go through in a testing environment. It's not like that. The reality is when you get on track, it's not like that. So,
all right, Tommy T, is there any truth, do you think, to Karen's statement?
Whatever he's saying, regardless, the Honda loses way less than that Mercedes, which is the main point.
yeah.
So what they're having to deal with, and that's why they're trying not to lose an engine for as long as they can, but then they've got to toss up, well, what's the point of having an engine that's functional but has degraded so far that we can't out-qualify Red Bull in these last 3 tracks after Brazil, where we assume that overtaking is going to be hard. So that's where qualifying is going to be key. You're going to need a power unit that can handle that. So I think that's why they've gone Brazil, which makes so much sense to me because this is going to be, of the last 4 races, this is going to be the one where overtaking is possible, as we saw today.
Yeah. Well, it is good time. Look, a lot of people, as a result of this massive power increase, have gone, Hamilton's cheating. You know what? I'm glad for it because I don't want the championship to be decided this weekend. I want the championship to be decided in Abu Dhabi in the last lap. And if it means that Hamilton and Mercedes need to have a slight advantage over the next two races, and Max comes in and wins Abu Dhabi, and that suddenly clinches the championship, then I'm here for that because I want all the way to the end. This is a season that is very thrilling, to be honest, and engaging. Let's keep it all the way through to the end. Let's talk about, though, this DRS issue. Campy, you might be able to explain a little bit more of a technical area, but let me just put my tinfoil hat on for a second. Do you think there was a bonus announced, or at least Max said that Red Bull would pay him a bonus if he won sprint qualifying? I wonder if the bonus was 50,000 euros, which would exactly cover the cost of him having a play around with that Mercedes rear wing and the DRS area. Campy, you can call me Alex Jones, but what do you think of that significant play? Because he wasn't backwards about coming forwards about it. He just jumped straight out of that car, had a look at his own rear wing, and went over there. Do you think there was any premeditation to that in terms of conversation, or he just think that's it, he's had enough, he's going to have a look at what's going on?
Oh, look, it's obviously been a conversation that's been had behind closed doors at Red Bull for a while. They obviously decided that they were going to put a protest in or something to get the stewards check it after qualifying. I think they're biding their time a bit. But for Max to get out and touch the car like that suggests to me that there's total communication behind closed doors. But the actual infraction is not that there was a difference in the wing as it sat was perfectly fine. In the closed position, it's got to be within 10 to 15 mil gap, and in the open position, it can be no more than 85 millimeters at a pressure of 85 newtons. Now, they've got a little device that they slide in, and it's calibrated at 10 newtons, so that if the device goes in and sits there perfectly fine, then it's illegal. So it worked. They couldn't do it on the middle of the structure, but the device plugged in on the outside of the structure, which tells me there could be some wear and tear. But there just seems to be something not right going on, because Max to get out and touch it like that, it just seems a bit ridiculous. I don't think he broke anything or did anything, but it could just be a part that's been used for a long time. And, we're talking about to the naked eye, no one would ever pick that. It was perfectly fine. It's just that there's a bit of wiggle room and play in the flexiness of the part, which we've seen flexi rings, and we've had this conversation about movable and flexi parts on F1 cars for years. So a bit of a shame for Lewis, but if you want to read the rules by the book, there you go. I think the biggest issue, and Mercedes will go to absolute town on trying to rectify it because Max touched the car. So anyway.
So Tommy T, Toto came out and said it's not, we're not doing it on purpose. It's potentially just a failure of the part after, lots of usage. Do you think, I personally don't think Mercedes are dumb enough to be doing anything outside of the rules this end of the season. I am inclined to believe him. That's probably going to cause some people frustration, going, that bloody cheated. Hamilton cheated, right? Okay, Max is the best. I don't care, all right? Get your own podcast. But from that sense, though, I agree. And but it's interesting, and Campy just mentioned there, you look back to halfway through the season, which feels like an age ago, to Red Bull's rear wings and them having the test, and Mercedes doing the same thing. And then Christian Horner came out after sprint qualifying and said, there's just not something quite right about that Mercedes rear wing, and hasn't been all year. He was very serious. He wasn't as, aggressive as he normally is in a Sky F1 interview. Could there potentially be something more to come, do you think, from Red Bull in the form of a protest?
Well, we've seen this. It's been quiet recently, hasn't it? But earlier in the season, we saw back and forward. We saw, was it Mercedes complaining about pit stops? And now we've had to add this extra measure into pit stopping because Red Bull were too quick. So each of them are looking for ways to slow each other down or pull them back into regulation if they've got away with something. So I think this is just another version of that. I tend to agree. Otherwise, why wouldn't they have done it to Bottas's car as well, where they don't really care about his driver championship? He's out categorically now. He can't win it mathematically. So why would they not have done it for his car and risked it for both, for the championship points for the team, which is the end goal? It doesn't make sense to have just done it on Lewis's car alone So that's why I tend to believe that it is just one of those wear and tear things. Something maybe put together wrong, which was mentioned in the FIA like press release. Maybe it was something, put together wrong, something in the wrong order, things like that. Because, like Campy said, when it's stationary, it's fine. It's under tolerance when it is dealing with it. So it's obviously a very minute change. Somehow it's opening wider under tolerance, which it shouldn't do. It doesn't make sense, does it?
Oh,
Yeah,
man,
absolutely.
we're literally talking about a washer could be in the wrong place, and that's
That's
what
it,
causes
exactly
the
right.
effect.
Yep.
And it's
So-
interesting. It's interesting because, and I'm not sure necessarily if Mercedes were affected by this, but there was a delay from Mexico to Brazil of all of the stuff arriving, and the FIA had to basically say to the teams, "All right, well, in the normal curfew of whatever it is, 9 or 10 o'clock is lifted. Basically, do what you want to be able to get your cars ready in time." So I suppose, as Crofty said, it's the equivalent of losing your luggage, and I lost my luggage here, and it
Shut
took
up.
3 days for it to run. No one cares. Which
cares?
could potentially have added some stress to this. Don't forget, we're in the middle of a triple header here. It's a lot of work for these guys and girls. So anyway, look, it's interesting. It just throws more jeopardy. It's more headline grabbing activity, but by both Mercedes and by Red Bull. Let's talk a little bit further down the grid, though. Let's talk about McLaren because we should. Daniel Ricciardo didn't out-qualify Lando Norris. He started behind
It
him.
was half a tenth.
Yeah, he started behind him in 8th. So really, with the conversations that we've been having around, is DR the number one driver for McLaren yet? Well, look, who really knows? It's just good that they're both within that sort of time frame now. We're not, seeing a significant difference. And
Totally.
look, fair play to Lando for both qualifying and for the sprint qualifying. He had a decent time out. Scampy rolls his eyes.
Whatever that means.
Yeah,
Danny Rick
but-
just got caught in no man's land into turn one and he's breaking at ghosts, unfortunately. He was breaking for things that weren't even there. So
well, as a result of Mexico, I'm not
two
surprised.
it's 2 weekends in a row. I mean, geez, it's tough to watch, isn't it?
Let's talk about qualifying before we talk about sprint, though. Ferrari's pace, I want to talk a little bit about because they're now on track, in my mind, to continue their dominance of McLaren to take that third position, especially if you look at the power unit difference in the tracks to come. But for qualifying ahead of sprint, we had Leclerc in 6th and Sainz in 5th. Carlos Sainz really loves this track, doesn't he, Tommy T?
Yeah.
From a qualifying point of view, are you starting to sort of become a little bit more natural or normal seeing Ferrari this far up the grid?
Yeah, the last couple of races, they've been way more competitive. I think since we've seen the McLarens both take an engine penalty, they've probably slipped back, whereas when we've seen the Ferraris take their engine penalties and get new engines, they've lifted. I think that improvement we've seen since Russia, I think it was, when Leclerc or someone took theirs. But yeah, they've both been outstanding. I think they're really loving that car, unfortunately, whereas the McLaren guys are still dealing with some little niggles and stuff, trying to figure out how to best utilize it, whereas they're really comfortable with that Ferrari, I think, right now. So Sainz is giving Leclerc the business at the moment as well, which we love.
Mm-hmm.
Very excited about that.
I think we could see a repeat of a Monza this weekend, but with Ferrari. I think if Sainz can get out the front off the start, he'd be a very capable winner over a race distance, I think.
Campy, does it go to sort of play to Ferrari's hands a little bit, though, that McLaren had to use those development tokens early on in the season for that new Mercedes power unit, and Ferrari are able to bring a little bit more later on?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So,
All right. Well,
are we
Does
worried
Ferrari
about
get
it?
like an extra 20 tokens or something because they're Ferrari? Isn't that how it works?
Ferrari cheap.
They
too,
just
I
so-
just need to go back to the machine and getting whatever they want.
yeah.
I mean, do you look at Mattia Binotto and go, this is a trustworthy kind of guy? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
2 more points about qualifying before we talk about sprint. The first is that Mazepin was very emotional in his chat with Lawrence Barretto over a missed line into 6, I think, or 7, and it wasn't so good. And he was visibly emotional, almost in tears. I know we've given Mazepin a hard run all year. It's the first time we've seen real emotion. Do you think he was sad about that or sad about the fact that he got kicked out of a Red Bull party after Mexico?
Both.
Okay.
I think genuinely he thought he could outqualify his teammate for the first time, legitimately. And he had, like it was mentioned from his engineer, that he hasn't done any sim here. He hasn't raced here before. And for him to be that good so quickly, he should be very impressed and very proud of himself. But he was just pissed off that he couldn't get it done, wasn't he? And finally, we actually get to see something from Mazepin.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's probably less of his fault and more of the coverage that we just don't get to see anything from him. But that was a real human kind of moment, and we actually start to understand how important it is to him. He's not just a rich kid who's doing this because he wants to live the playboy lifestyle. It's because he actually cares and he wants to do well. And we do have to remember he was very quick in F2 with same machinery, in a very good team with very good setups, but he is a good driver. We just haven't managed to see it this year in a car that hasn't been improved, in the worst team on the grid, and whatever Campy would say there. The worst grid on the team.
Worst grid on the team.
Worst grid on the team. But I think he thought this was the one. He thought he could get Russell, to be honest, as well. He thought he could beat a Williams in qualifying, and that's probably why he's so down.
Campy, do you think it's a little bit harsh of everyone to have a constant go at him? We even had Brundle and
some people just rub people up the wrong way, and like you get criticised for it. So suck it up. Like, move on. If that's the hat that you put on, and you didn't get into the sport with a great start, well, toughen up. It's like human nature. You can't fix that stuff. If you're an idiot, people are going to call you out. In saying that, I don't want to see the guy that emotional. I don't think that's not what we want to watch. So, yeah, I feel
okay,
for
cool.
a bit.
The other thing to note is that our favourite Canadian out-qualified George Russell.
George is
properly out-qualified on pace.
Having some tech issues, boys.
It's good news for him, Tommy T, in terms of what that means for next year. And of course, with Albon coming in, it's going to be a good measure for Nick Latifi, I think, in terms of how he stacks up against Albon. But we have to remember, and we said this, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, that we've been very impressed with his progress and how consistent he's been. It's a good showing from him.
Definitely.
Is it to say that he has now got the rhythm of the car and finding a good place going ahead for next year, but also for the rest of this year, maybe?
I suppose devil's advocate would go, George has moved on, the team's moved on and are focusing on Latifi. But I think that's disingenuous to how well he's been doing this year. I think he has actually demanded more attention from the team. He is performing well and getting his engineers on side to help. He has been performing that well. He's been unlucky in a lot of these qualifyings with George still pipping him at the end through timing, through him going out first or traffic and situations like that. So I think this is long overdue, actually, to be honest, him out qualifying George. But I think it does, we've mentioned multiple times, this is going to be really interesting to see him versus Albon, who has been in a much more impressive car and much more impressive teammates, how well they go against each other.
Yeah, well, it's good news. Campy, I'm not sure if you're still physically...
I'm still here.
I
just can't.
Your camera's disappeared again. In terms of Latifi, though, mate, and George Russell, I was just saying to Tommy T that it looks like there's some real progress being made. Do you think it's
absolutely?
Do you think it's Latifi's progress, or do you think there's issues for George Russell?
No, I think it's Latifi's improvement all year. We've seen him. We've seen him, like, at times be quicker than George, and then George has come out and put a stonking lap together. But if you look at particularly last 7 or 8 races, he's been right there or thereabouts, and it hasn't been the 3.5, 4 tenths we've seen at times. It's actually been legitimately a tenth, half a tenth here and there. So, that guy's developed really well this season. Moving into next year, they'll be very happy with Latifi and the driver that he is. George has pushed him. Let's just hope Albon can push him next year. But no, I think George has had a killer qualifying record up until now. To come out and say it was his worst qualifying ever just because he got beaten by his teammate, I think that's a bit disrespectful to Latifi and actually how much he's come on in the second half, particularly in his last 7, 8 races. So, next year in that car, third year, you'd be looking at him to make some headlines outside of George Russell, and that's what we want to see from the guy.
I'm going to go through what the qualifying positions were, lads, and then I want to talk about Valtteri Bottas before we talk about the sprint quali results. So the starting grid for the sprint race, which was qualifying on Friday, was Verstappen, Bottas, Perez, Gasly, Sainz, Leclerc, Norris, Ricciardo, Alonso, Ocon, Vettel, Tsunoda, Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Stroll, Latifi, Russell, Mick Schumacher, Mazepin, and a disqualified Lewis Hamilton, as we discussed earlier, that rear wing. It was an interesting mix of the grid. Good to see Bottas, of course, up towards the front. Now, I just want to step sideways before we talk more about the racing. I'm not sure if you lads have listened to Beyond the Grid, F1's official podcast this week. They spoke to, or Tom spoke to Valtteri Bottas. And in that episode, he confirmed that he had two options for next year. And one was Mercedes power unit, in that of the Williams. And the other was the Alfa Romeo, of course, the Ferrari power unit. One of the questions that Tom put to Valtteri, which I thought was very interesting, was, do you think this then, Valtteri, is a path to you being in red overalls at some point in the future, which is not something that I had actually thought of. But it's an interesting point. Tommy T, let's start with you. In terms of where you think Valtteri is, obviously, and we know the result of the sprint, don't we? But obviously the monkey's off the back. We've said that a few times. Sorry, let me say this as well before I ask the question. He also said he really suffered at Mercedes in retrospect from having year-to-year contracts. And Toto said it was good for him to be under pressure. He disagrees now in retrospect because he always felt like he never had enough time to get to grips with the car. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. So now that he's certain of his future in a multi-year deal for Alfa Romeo, Sauber, he's obviously performing a lot better. So it shows that VB performs with a little bit of, backing behind him.
Yeah, I think just that feeling of being comfortable is probably what he's looking forward to. He's probably felt like somewhat of a stranger. Like we've seen that meme of him alone drinking a beer after a win in his trailer. Like that's kind of, unfortunately, I reckon that's what it feels like to be at Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton there. That's not Lewis's fault in any way. He is unbelievable and 7-time world champion. He is one of the best we'll ever see. But it can't be easy to be that teammate, can it? And I think that's just a hard place to go. He's had wins. He's had many poles. He's had all these kind of things that go along with being the teammate of a championship-winning car. But he hasn't really had that kind of support that he's needed the whole time to have his own campaign towards winning a championship. It's always been focused around Lewis. So I think him just moving to a place, like we mentioned last week, I think he's going to be the focus of that team. He is going to be without kind of expectations because that team is where it is. And hopefully he can show some stuff. And I literally hadn't crossed my mind, but that is such a good point that maybe that is the avenue towards another top team, is taking some time out in Alpha, performing really well like he did back in his junior, when he came up as a junior into Williams, and he was dominating in that team with no pressure. So who knows? I don't think it's the pressure that gets to him. I think it's the fact that the focus was never about him, and he almost just wasn't allowed to be the hero of that team when you've got Lewis Hamilton there.
Campy, he mentioned a few things, the reason why he chose Alfa Romeo over Williams. One of them was a completely clean start, clean break without that Mercedes power unit link at all. He also mentioned, of course, and this is absolutely correct, that Sauber have a great wind tunnel facility. They have great engineers, and they have they have a good simulator that could be better. And he's even said in the podcast, but I can help with that. You can really tell, and again, if you haven't listened to this podcast, please go and do so, but you can really tell when he's talking about Sauber and also sidebar coffee. Tommy T, have you seen Valtteri somewhere this weekend? It's got coffee all over it. That he seems more focused and he seems happier. We know that people like Seb Vettel, Campy in the past have said about their Aston Martin thing, oh, well, there's a future in the team, so I will help pull it together. But this will be the first time properly that Valtteri has had that opportunity. What do you think that means for Sauber or Alfa Romeo for the next couple of years? And what do you think it means for whoever ends up next to him in a junior driver sense?
Oh, I think for Guan Yu Zhou, it's going to be an absolute smack in the face about how unqualified he is to be in this sport coming up against Valtteri Bottas. I think we're going to see half a second to 7 tenths every qualifying session, and race pace absolutely nowhere near where it should be. I think for a guy like Valtteri, I think some people respond to a bit of tough love sometimes and know no pat on the back, thank you, we appreciate it. But I think Valtteri's the kind of guy that probably sits there and goes, you know what, I just want to be valued. I want to feel like I'm valued at times. I mean, Toto's not the most warm guy like that at times. You know, very methodical and very straight down the line the way he sees it. But I don't think Mercedes have shown him any loyalty at all. I mean, he's had a 1-year contract every time he's got an extension, which means you're under pressure for your job. And for a guy like Valtteri, he just needs to feel a bit of love and a bit of respect. In saying that, I think, you know, I mean, it must be hard to race in a team alongside Lewis Hamilton. They clearly made decisions after the Rosberg era. They were not going to get a driver that was comparable to Lewis on that level week in, week out, because we saw that the dramas that it caused within the team. Valtteri is probably the perfect fit for him. But no need to give him that 3-year contract when you get into a top drive. Like everyone else that gets into a Red Bull or a Ferrari, you're like, oh, we're going to show you some love. You've now made the pinnacle of the sport and you deserve the 3 or 4 years. I don't think Mercedes honoured him at all in that respect. We've seen glimpses of what he can do. But, I mean, since he signed that deal with Alfa Romeo, we've seen what he's capable of when that pressure's off him. In the background. I just think there's probably some culture issues inside Mercedes and the way that they, you know, bend over backwards for Lewis Hamilton, which I understand at times as well. But, yeah, I think moving forward it's going to be tough for him. So,
yeah, I love what you said there about, you know, feeling valued. And it's interesting because we've all said that Toto has, you know, shown the best team principle, attitude and everything else going forward. But really now listening to someone who has nothing to lose, literally nothing to lose now, no Mercedes links, leaving the team, going to Ferrari power unit area, to be able to be so open and honest while still racing for them is an interesting time, and it's good. And I think it's cathartic, obviously, for Valtteri as well. And obviously we love him because he's an adopted Australian with his partner in Tiffany. Okay, let's start talking then about the sprint qualifying race session time thing that happened. My whole favourite part was Seb Vettel pulling up at the very end and telling his engineer that he was going to jump out and touch Hamilton's rear wing. His engineer coming back saying, please don't do that. It's very expensive. He's like, nah, just joking. I'm going to go to the front wing. That's probably just 25 grand. Love Seb. Him here for the content for Seb Vettel.
Love it.
But he performed pretty well considering. Okay, let's talk about what actually happened though, because soft tyres was an interesting choice for Valtteri Bottas right at the very beginning. Pretty much everyone else around him had those mediums. Tommy T, the Max Verstappen apparently suffered some gear sync issues getting off the start. You could see, as Martin Brundle said, the second phase of his start, effectively second gear, third gear, he just was nowhere near the pace that Valtteri Bottas had.
Yep.
And off VB went. He did a great job to manage those tyres all the way to the end. And, of course, talking about how he's performing this year, this just goes to show, I think, some, you know, more unhinged driving. We've said it time and time again, him 2019 Australia, that drive, and he's even said that's his probably second best performance. That drive, incredible from him. But how he managed to hold that start, and of course with Max Verstappen's issues, just goes to show that the cars, you know, the fast car kind of mentality around who's quickest overall isn't necessarily the case for this year, isn't it?
No, I think you can't fault VB's start. He absolutely nailed it. He wasn't even questioned going into turn one. He was well through. Yeah. There was almost no chance Max had to come back from that after that. Yeah, like you said, second phase. And then to manage those tires, like he even said to the team afterwards, he's like, good call on the strategy, like going the softs. He knew he was going to have better traction than Max, probably not that good, I don't think. But yeah, managed to make it work. He's like, that was the correct tire choice. Great work. They hung on just as much as they needed to. And yeah, on such a short lap, like getting ahead was so key. Absolutely nailed it. Love to see it from VB. Hopefully we can see more of it from Alpha next year.
What are your thoughts on VB's start, Campy?
Mega. Just what we expected of him at the start of the year, really. He's doing everything right in the last since he's signed that contract. So
let's talk further down the grid, because Carlos Sainz was like, hello there, and entered the chat hardcore against Perez and Verstappen. Great to see. We mentioned just before, of course, with Charles Leclerc and Sainz in terms of this pace difference. Leclerc finishing in 7th, though. Sainz in 3rd. It was I mean, he obviously loves this track. It's McLaren's first podium for a while was him post-race. And geez, let's see if Martin Brundle or David Croft can point out where Alex Albon was taken out one more time every bloody lap. They love doing that. But for him, Campy, for Carlos Sainz, for Ferrari, again, on soft tyres, he said for most of, in fact, from halfway through, there was a couple of radio messages saying, my tyres are going, my tyres are going. But he managed to hold off Perez very, very well indeed. Do you think now he's fully in tune with this Ferrari? Campy? Lost him. Tommy T, do you think he's fully in tune?
Yes, I do. I think he's so comfortable with that car. Yeah, we thought early on he was probably one of the best drivers, wasn't he, to adapt to his new team, coming from that McLaren, which we realise now is quite difficult to drive. So it was probably really nice to get into that Ferrari, which is somewhat more straightforward. But to be honest, like, there's no lead driver in that team, as we can see. But I think Sainz is going to pit Leclerc. I really do. I think he has got the mentality and he's got that. Leclerc is very good at that kind of running his own race in fourth kind of style. I think Sainz actually has the ability to give that kind of like push to the front runners, and he was very aggressive off the start. He nailed it, and I would not want to be kind of trying to get past him at the start of that race if I was Hamilton and Perez. He's in such an annoying spot for them because, like we saw last week, you do not want to get stuck with some back markers, because this is one of the shortest laps we've got. It is such a short lap, so you will be overtaking cars constantly trying to get back, and you'll just get stuck with that field spread, and your race is over because you just can't get back that difference. So he is going to be probably the biggest linchpin, I think, as to Perez and Hamilton actually being able to help their teammates ahead.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, of course, for Ferrari to maintain that further up the field action ahead of McLaren, as we said. Now, I'm sort of a little concerned about where McLaren finish up this year. Of course, we had some mega results, but Ferrari seem to be more consistent with both of their drivers, which is obviously what needs to happen. But interesting now then how Red Bull performed. Now, Campy, the temperature for the sprint race was a little cooler. The track temperature was a little cooler because it was a little bit later in the day compared to what we will expect for the race, of course, with heavier fuel loads at the very beginning. Slightly warmer temperatures is predicted for both track then, of course, and ambient temperature. For the race, we obviously now have a Mercedes at the very front and Lewis Hamilton in fifth. So there's a Ferrari smack bang in the middle of it. Yes. So he's a smack bang in the middle of it. What do you think they can do? I mean, Perez now really is, he needs to be on point, doesn't he, for how he performs for the rest of this race, but also for the rest of this season, to ensure that Max has a good chance at winning this championship. How do you play Perez for this race?
Absolute rear gunner. He has to sacrifice himself to hold up Lewis Hamilton in any way possible. I think what the idea will be, as Hamilton's moving up that pack, hopefully he loses that 10 to 15 seconds just because of the starting position on the grid. But seeing that sprint race last night and what Lewis did, I mean, I don't think you can stop that train coming at the moment. I think he's going to be way too fast for everybody tonight, his teammate included. But they will try and get a pit stop ahead of him really early in the race and then just sacrifice Perez just to get in front of him on really fresh tyres and hold him at bay. Although I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, rear gunner, he's got to play the team role at the moment. I mean, Valtteri, I think he'll get the start and he'll get off. So he may just run the race at a pace which is comfortable for him. I think the Mercedes is clearly the dominant car this weekend. I mean, half a second in qualifying, I mean, you know,
pretty big.
I mean, I know it's one lap and Mercedes have been lacking, but Mercedes are pretty good. I think if they get this right tonight, I think Bottas will hold the hold the pace of the race up so that Hamilton can keep within striking distance, and then let's hope, you know, safety car with 20 laps to go and Lewis just comes home like a freight train. I think that's what they'll be planning. But every teammate, every decision is expendable at the moment. It's all about getting Lewis to the front, and it's all about keeping Lewis behind if you're Red Bull.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. Let's look further down the field, though, for the sprint race. Tommy T, Kimi Räikkönen. was bloody in there amongst it. It was Kimi and Alonso and Giovinazzi. If you wanted a good way of definitely not driving for a team next year, it would be spinning off Kimi Räikkönen into turn one, which is exactly what Giovinazzi did.
Yep.
It was a bit of a shame because the stat is he's never started outside the top 10 here in Brazil.
Yeah.
Of course, he's been racing here for about 72 years. But for Alfa Romeo, though, it has to be said that they were really in the good mix, at least for halfway through the race, the qualifying period. And it's a shame to see Kimi spin off and go all the way to the back.
Yeah, I mean, Alonso managed to avoid all of that, which is just him being brilliant. But I don't know if I'd fully blame Giovinazzi. He was pretty alongside, and Kimi kind of came to switch back pretty hard. It was the slightest of touches in the wrong spot, and he just spun. But classic Kimi actually managed to save it, but the damage was done. He'd lost places, so it was what it was. But yeah, it's not really what you want, whether it's your fault or not, from Giovinazzi. Like it's crime in a team stuff, which is not what we want. To be honest, he's done for, isn't he?
Yeah,
it's pretty inevitable. Regardless of that, he was already on the out from what we understand. That is pretty much sewn up with Joe going in next year.
Which is a shame. It is a shame. Yeah. And look, and to defend Giovinazzi a little bit too, when he looked to his right, it was Fernando Alonso there. Yeah. And Nando got sandwiched by two Alphas. But again, just an absolutely mega move, Campy, of Kimi around the very outside, who made it stick. And if it wasn't for that wheel contact, or the tyre contact, I should say, he would have stayed up in those positions, could have been fighting around that sort of 11th, 12th position. But Fernando Alonso, Campy, though, is just a wily old dog, isn't he? It's a shame that his teammate finished ahead of him in 8th, because I think the drive really belonged to him in that team for this qualifying.
Yep, I think he's. Look, we know how good he is. We know what we hope comes to him next year. I mean, he's a way better driver than Ocon, but hey, Ocon is in F1 for a reason, because he's very capable.
Race winners. Esteban Ocon.
There should be an asterisk next to those sort of races. Seriously.
For Hülkenberg to never have had a podium, let alone a win,
insane,
and for Ocon to have that, he would have just been like, screw this. This sucks. I'm out.
Yeah, look, Alonso, he'll be fine. He's looking forward to next year, and I think that's what all these guys are really looking forward to. So,
agree with you there. The other person I want to talk about, Campy, is your man in the bin, fresh from the bin, Pierre Gasly, who qualified incredibly well. He was in 4th. I mean, that Honda power unit doing good things, but just got a terrible start. And then ended up in 7th, which was a bit of a shame, to be perfectly honest, in terms of how it came. But just watching Hamilton's overtake on him with his fresh power unit and DRS wide open, it was like he was standing still. What do you think he can do, though, from the bin in 7th this weekend? Do you think he can potentially hold up Hamilton, given the fact that it's going to be a slightly heavier car with a fuller fuel load?
Nope, absolutely not.
Jeez, I'm glad I asked that question to you.
Well, I mean, look, the kid's good. He's shown some pace. He's the lead driver in that team, and he's getting good results. Unfortunately, he was so bad in the top team that's going to taint his whole career. What more do you want me to say about the guy? Is he going to hold Hamilton up? Is he going to hold Hamilton up? Absolutely not. Hamilton is going to come like a freight train tonight. And I'm so looking forward to it. I could watch that sprint race and Hamilton on board the whole time, 10 times over today. That was an absolute masterclass in doing what he had to do to win a world championship. And I don't think we've seen a drive like that in 24 laps anywhere in a very, very long time. So he's a star.
The reason why I asked.
That is a social breakout right there, James. Mark that one down.
The reason yeah, you're not wrong. The reason why
it's something to get excited
about. Is because in 2019, that's exactly what he did, and he held on to get across the line ahead of him. Anyway,
exactly.
I mean, what would I know?
It was I knew what you were doing, James.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah, should have asked me when he hunkered down to the car
exactly,
just to make sure he was smooth. Yeah, come on.
He should never have been there in the first place.
Since when am I the bloody historian of F1 as well, man? That's your job.
As if I care about Gasly. There should be an asterisk next to those sort of results.
How many asterisks are you giving out today? Jeez.
Please, I'm
asterisk.
grumpy. My
He's
uncle just sent
grumpy.
me. My uncle just sent me a photo of an Irish flag too, the cheeky prick. So he's fired me up.
Could you send a photo of you so we could actually have your face on this live stream? Because at the moment it's just Tommy T and I nodding whilst you're talking is all I can see.
Ah, look, unfortunately, like technology, I buy all this nice stuff because you guys tell me to.
It's our
just-
fault now, James.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was
it's
waiting
just
for it.
sent it up the creek since I've tried to do it. So unfortunately, and Apple, I can't even get an extra bloody USB-C point. What a nightmare! That's
Oh no, the
Oh.
iPad doesn't have another slot for it.
what do you want me to do?
Oh, all right. Let's talk about
Goals.
Hamilton and we'll wrap this one up. Look, mega from him in terms of performances. Tommy T up there
Yeah.
with LeBron James, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure, on par with LeBron.
Yeah.
Everything he's doing at the
What is
moment.
he for from like 15? He did not choke last night like LeBron does consistently.
This is just my favourite part of the moment.
Okay, me and you are going to absolutely, we're going to square Tommy up when we have beers next year. We're going to drop him together.
This is what Mark K said in the Discord from earlier. Lewis hasn't choked as hard as LeBron did in 2011. So there you go. You guys are on the same page already, Campy.
You guys are on the
Yeah.
You're the same person, I think.
Same person.
I think that's just
different
Campy's
side
other
of the
Discord
political
name.
spectrum. Yes, you're
Mark
right.
doesn't exist.
Oh.
It's just Campy's troll account.
Yeah, can be podcasting about basketball. Anyway, Lewis Hamilton, Tommy T. Let's talk about it
Outstanding.
because 20th to 5th, regardless of how much power that you have, I mean, the similar power units that were ahead of him in DR, who was able to defend against him in Monza for a race win, let alone him sort of around that 10th position, letting him through. It was a bloody masterclass, as
Was it
Campy
that-
said.
That move on Norris, was it Norris, I think? Into, that was outstanding. He was nowhere near that. That was such late braking. That was incredible. That was the move of the race, not race, whatever the hell it was. Yeah, he was on. Campy's so right. Like off the start, was it 2 or 3 positions? He was up to 14th, I think, like almost instantly. He was absolutely flying. And he kind of got stuck in a little bit of traffic for, a moment there. But then who was it? There was someone in particular was slowing him down and then cleared them and then he was off. He was off. It was interesting to talk to hear Brundle talk about how he was learning his way through that last corner, was it, onto
Yes.
the straight,
Yep.
rather than trying to stay so close, leaving some space to avoid the turbulence, and then gaining through the corner and keeping that momentum going. Like for a 7-time world champion to still be learning as he's going and adapting that quickly. This is why this guy is the best we've ever seen, and he is the LeBron James of F1.
Campy. Just to pick up on what Tommy T was saying there, coming out of the second to last corner, which effectively is the last corner at the moment with the cars the way they are. He also drove that differently with the McLarens than he did with any other car. He put his front left on the inside of the curb to get a slightly different line out. I mean, regardless of how much power he has extra and all of the cheating allegations, all the other nonsense, the way that he was driving was, and look, this is not a Hamilton fan podcast at all. It's not. In fact, it's the opposite most of the time. But you got to take your hat off to him with how he was driving that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Look, the guy writes these stories, and he's the main character in them all the time. So, jeez, I'm just getting the absolute piss taken out of me at the moment. I can't even keep a straight face. Hamilton is a superstar. I've said everything I need to say about him in this episode. He'll come like a freight train tonight, and I don't think he'll lose. I think something's going to go his way late, and he's just going to come home super strong, get the win. Max will finish in 5th or 6th, somewhere in that vicinity.
5th or 6th?
What's going on there? How's he doing that?
Really?
Yeah, I just think there's a bit more to play out in this championship. And this, I mean, when
I'm
we
going to hit him as a backmarker again.
when everything is against Lewis Hamilton and his back's against the wall, this is what he does. He comes out and shows utter domination, and that's what we've seen. So.
Yeah, it's good to watch. As I said earlier on at the very top of the podcast, Tommy T, I'm here for it. Let's make sure this championship stays alive all the way through to the end. And then Max Verstappen can put 1 on his car next year and have all the merchandise.
He's already said he wants it, doesn't he?
Jeez, he's just, and what the other thing that it was of note when he was at the end of the press conference after sprint qualifying is like, Well, if it's not this year, it's next year. They're all old and going to retire anyway. So at some point, I'm going to be
They're
the best.
duds. Yes,
Okay.
love it.
Good. Don't hold
love it.
back, please. All right, Campy. What are we watching for in the race tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock Australian Eastern time?
Danny Rick needs to get a start.
I
But
think
I'll
that's
be
probably helpful for all 20
usually.
of them.
Yeah, look, for my enjoyment of the sport at the moment, he needs to get a start because I'm starting to get real frustrated seeing Danny Rick down the back.
Yes.
Especially when Lando's a bit further up. Lando will crash out. That's what he'll have an incident, lap one.
Will
Ocon
he
and
take out Max maybe?
Ocon and Verstappen will actually punch on this time around. But look, for me, I think whoever comes away with the championship lead tonight, in my mind, has got two hands on the championship. We go to the Middle East, and we should never be going back to the Middle East for races other than the start of the year. So this is the spiritual end of the championship for me. And
So that's it. Whoever's winning at the end of this race, that's it for you. The championship's over.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, good. Tommy T, what do you reckon?
No, I reckon Max has got it. I reckon it will be the other two Mercs on the podium, though. Yeah, I think Max will get Bottas off the start and then maintain from there. I think it's going to be on Perez to do a job to make sure that Lewis doesn't get up there too quickly. But I do think it will be Max and then the two Mercs. Probably they'll switch him, so Bottas in third.
Yeah, I think you're right. Look, either way, it's going to be a bloody good time. To see how Hamilton gets through the pack, starting from 10th, as Campy said.
Yeah.
He's got Vettel, Ocon, Gasly, Leclerc, Norris, Perez, signs between him and Max Verstappen. We know that Ferrari's doing pretty well in terms of holding cars up. It'll be interesting to see how they perform, probably on the medium. Yellow stripe tyre, which I imagine they'll put on. Campy, do you think it's a one-stop race for tomorrow morning?
I think it is. I think two-stop could work, though. Keep an eye. It's pretty close in the race sim, so if something happens, two-stop it is.
All to play for. It's good. As I said, it's great, in fact, that the championship is still going, even if it is the spiritual home here in Interlagos. Well, a massive thank you to you, both of you lads. Campy, well done on persevering through your technical issues, as well with no sleep. And a massive thank you to you for listening and watching this podcast. We bloody love doing what we're doing. And it's been interesting, can I just say, looking across the podcast landscape through Reddit on Formula One, and there's been a lot of people becoming very dissatisfied with some longer term podcasts going on, especially one out of the United States. We don't really have that. We have an amazing community that gets around, supports us, and is just constantly positive. But if you think we can do stuff better, please also reach out to us. Send us a DM on Instagram. Either one of us will read it. It'll probably be Lewis, who's doing an amazing job at holding together socials for the moment, and a massive thank you to him and shout out to him too. Now, don't forget, if you want to watch the race live, there will be some people who will be doing that as well. I will not be one of them. You can join those people, though, on our Discord server. The link is in the description below if you're listening or watching. Please also don't forget on YouTube, if you're watching along, to leave the video a like and a comment and play the algorithm as best as we can. And don't forget to update your fantasy team name ahead of the race tomorrow. Well, lads, that's it. We'll see you tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, in case Campy forgets, for our full race review of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Well, thank you to you, Livestream. Thanks to Zach, to Billy, to Forklifts on our Eau Rouge. That's a great name. To Dave, thank you. And Billy, who's LeBron? He asks, which was great. Massive shout out to you. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow at 5:30 for everything to come.